Welcome to Parenting Teens with Dr. Cam, a podcast about navigating adolescence without losing our minds. Each week, I guide you around the teenage landmines with practical tips, simple solutions, and words of encouragement. I'm your host, Dr. Cam. Let's get on with the show. I'm joined by my amazing nephew, Matt, to talk about identifying as transgender. Welcome, Matt. So good to see you.
Hello. I'm so excited to be back on. I think this is my third appearance.
Your third appearance.
Yeah.
It is. I know. I don't know why it's not more often. So today we're talking about, and we've been talking about this for quite some time, and I really appreciate you jumping on because I think there's a lot of misconceptions and confusion and fears around transgender. And I just wanted to hear your story, and I wanted you to share your story. Go ahead.
So like you said, my name's Matt. I go by he, him pronouns. I identify as non-binary and transmasculine. So basically for me, what that means is that I don't fit into either the man or the woman category. I am somewhere in between. I've been on testosterone for almost a year. It'll be a year at the end of this month.
Wow. It's been a year already?
Yeah. Isn't that crazy?
That is crazy.
Yeah. I had my top surgery back in, I think that was March that I had that, beginning of March. So coming to the like discovery about who I am and how I felt about myself. I mean, honestly, a lot growing up. I was very envious of all the boys around me and all the boys getting to do all the boy things. And I mean, although my friends were mostly guys when I was young, around like elementary and middle school, I was never fully seen as one of them. But I remember like one time, like being, I remember being out on like the playground, and like the guys in my class would like kind of huddle around this like group under the like playground equipment, and they would be like, oh, like no girls allowed, but like except for Maddie, like she can come join. And I was like, oh yeah, like I'm allowed to do, and I would play football with all the guys and all that. And kind of as I grew up, around like middle school, there was a lot of backlash, like being masculine and like kind of the things that people would assume about me. So and a lot of just like, I don't know, just a lot of like internalized hatred for wanting to be I don't know. And also I just didn't really know what it was. Like I just wished, like I wish I could have been born a boy. Kind of feeling, but I didn't know, I never really associated that with being trans.
Yeah.
And yeah, so middle school, high school, I just kind of conformed, and I performed gender really well.
You had all of us fooled because, right. And I think, once we get further there, but I just kind of want to, add just my perspective a little bit as we go through, just because I think parents might relate. But I just want to say, like, I think that was one of the biggest things, is that you growing up, there was no signs that we saw. And I look back going, what was I missing? And I think parents will relate to that, because it's like all of a sudden it was like, where did this come from? Because you were so good at hiding it.
I feel very different, because I look back at things I used to do as a kid, and I would be like, oh my God, Like, that's such a little boy on the inside,
Really?
like screaming to come out. Um, yeah, but like also like my mannerisms, like I always just like would copy whatever like my guy friends were doing. I would just like copy all of their mannerisms, and I would act and sit and like walk like and I mean I would also like actively protest um a lot of gender norms, and that's kind of that protest was what made me come to the conclusion that I wanted to be on testosterone. Um, yeah, I don't know if it was like a realization that like, oh my God, I'm trans, because I've always kind of just felt like this little in between, like not really a guy, but not really a girl. So really for me, I suppose as like someone who would like, I don't know. Where was I going? Oh, so for me, it was more of a decision. Like to, I want to transition.
Yeah.
I want to. This is how I envision myself being, and I want to um go towards. I want to push towards that gender euphoria.
Yeah. And so growing up, I don't like the option, I'm putting in quotes, the option to be identified as transgender, I don't feel like really existed. I mean, like when I was growing, it definitely wasn't. Even when you were growing up, you didn't really hear about that. Like then it was kind of like,
I mean,
sexual orientation was far more, but I don't.
There was some representation. Hold on, I need to grab a charger real quick. Okay, there was some representation in some media, but like it was very few, and it wasn't good representation.
Right.
If you know what I'm saying. But like, yeah, like there was a trans guy on Degrassi, and then also again on the L Word, but then they weren't represented well, and they were kind of made out to like be kind of assholes, and like they transitioned, and then all of a sudden we're just like toxic and masculine and things like that.
They went from one box to the other.
Right.
And I think
and I never grew up like with a non-binary character, so I didn't know what that looked like. I didn't know what that meant. And yeah, and it really took like social media to give me those terms and those definitions, and that representation to be like, oh my God, I see myself in this, and I see what I could be.
Yeah, I want to address that real quick because Matt, I think that's a really important thing, because this is what I hear a lot, and the fears that I hear a lot is that this is I don't know if phase is the right word, but it's because of social media that kids are now identifying that. And so it's social media's to blame for kids now identifying or questioning their gender. And the way that I've heard it from you and a lot of your friends and other people I've talked to, it's not to blame. It's thankfully, because of social media, you've been able to identify who the heck you are and be able to explain and label it and feel like you belong somewhere. So it didn't make you that way. It gave you a home and a sense of belonging and an ability to accept yourself.
Right.
So I want to just make that clear that social media is not making the problem. They're actually resolving it in a way, because now you've got a home, and before kids were at risk of suicide or they were lying and miserable because they didn't know how to identify.
And also I think it brought a lot of attention to the kids that was happening to, because they were sharing their stories. I mean, I remember in 2014, there was the story about Lalina, who was a trans girl who, was isolated and felt alone. So she started a little Tumblr blog and talked about like her whole experience.
Yeah.
And like sadly, she like was lost to suicide. And like everyone saw it happen and play out, and you know, and even her family after she died like refused to call her by her name, and they blamed Tumblr and like social media for the reason, you know. And it was so sad to see. But also I'd like to say like trans people have existed forever,
Yeah.
like since the beginning of like recorded time. Like Joan of Arc, for example, is, you know, a common trans person in history. I mean, even though they didn't have that terminology back then, you know, we do now to kind of describe that. So yeah, it's made more of a community with the internet.
Yeah. People are able to find people and find support with that and share. So tell us a little bit about when you first like came out to your family, including me, and I already gave Matt permission to blast me because I know I didn't handle it well. And I want to do that because I don't think I handled it terribly, but I know I could have done it better because I think I represent where a lot of people's headspace is, because it is, for my generation, it wasn't a choice. It wasn't something that we saw very often. You know, we were accepting homosexuality then was the new, like, being able to be comfortable. Now that's like, okay, at least for a lot of people. So this was something that pushed comfort zone of familiarity, right? And I think that does with a lot of parents. So I want to hear from your perspective. What was that experience like coming out to your family?
I feel like I definitely came out in a very non-traditional way, if there is a traditional way of coming out. I kind of just texted the group chat, and it was definitely very nerve-wracking. But you know, we have the family group chat, and I was like, hey, if there's any grounds to where I feel most safest doing this, it's just, you know, through a quick text, boom, we're done, straight to the point, you know, no further face-to-face conversation about it. And like I mean, I knew that everyone would be accepting, but I knew that it would take a minute, and it would take time for people to adjust and get used to. And it was a huge like leap of faith, because just that, you know, energy alone, I mean, it's a lot to deal with. But I think overall, I think the family took it pretty well. You know, I mean, no one really took it badly. But there is kind of that like weird adjustment of like, you know, everyone getting used to your pronouns, you know, your name. And
it's such a big change, right? And it's something that in a way is not reversible. And so as a parent, and as, I mean, I feel like I'm a third parent to you. You know, so it's like all of a sudden you feel this responsibility, whether it's my responsibility or not, to ask the hard questions, because it is hard to understand when you're not there, right? And so I think it was asking those questions. It was more for my benefit, I think, than for yours, to make sure that I felt comfortable, that you were comfortable, if that made sense. And I appreciate you for really like being patient with me through that. And I think the hardest part is the pronouns.
Yeah.
It's so hard. Why is it so hard? It's like,
I don't know.
it is. It's so hardwired in your head that it
Mhm.
becomes really hard. I think we're getting a
Yeah,
lot better. Like, I don't even think that it's a question anymore, but it took
right.
a while.
And sometimes, like, it's not really just about pronouns. It's also like, I want you to see me for who I am and how I see myself. And like, there's times, I mean, like early on, there was times when I saw people using the right pronouns, but they didn't see me as a man. Like
Right.
they were calling me he, him, but they didn't see me as who I was. And I can tell just by like people, like how would people would, talk in their language and their tone and stuff like that. Um but yeah, after a couple months on testosterone, that kind of changed.
Yeah. And I think we didn't, like, you can't just
Mhm.
switch.
Right.
When
And
you've known
also,
you for that many years one
mhm,
way,
right.
that is not a mind shift that is a quick, that's like turning a
Mhm,
huge boat, right? It takes some time to turn. But I think you had mentioned wanting to identify the difference between acceptance and support.
right.
Can you go into that a little bit?
There's definitely a difference between just accepting the fact that someone is trans, like that's fine, whatever, I'll live with it, and supporting them and being there for, you know, and celebrating their identity and who they are. Um, and I think support is just really important and really what kids need, um, transitioning, especially at a young age when, I definitely could not have done this at 15, 16, I would not have the strength to put up with the things that I have dealt with, or like the mental, like emotional maturity
Well,
that I
share
have
some of
now.
that. What are you talking about? Like, what, because I think this is what a lot of parents fear. Oh my gosh, this
Mhm.
is going to make my child's life so much harder. But I want to
Right,
clarify, it's not a choice. If it was a
right,
choice, they wouldn't make that choice, because it
right,
does make their life harder. So
right.
explain that a little bit.
I think just dealing like with other people's ignorance is probably the hardest part. Um, and also, I guess a little bit like just the fear of, there are people in this world that hate transgender people, that have a deep rooted hatred,
Yeah.
and that could be scary at times. Like in certain parts of this country, you don't know things about that, and like if you're not passing as well, that can make situations a whole lot scarier for you. um but if I didn't have a support system behind me, I don't think it would make it a whole lot worse to go through. If I with every I mean, I do TikToks, and sometimes a lot of times I get a lot of hate comments.
Mm.
And it's just ignorance. And if I didn't know that there was, so like 100 other people that loved me, even, you know, and supported the fact that I was trans, for every hate comment, I mean, it makes it a whole lot easier.
Yeah.
Um, and just dealing with people's ignorance, I'm able to come to you and be like, what do I do about this situation? How do I handle this?
Yeah.
um you know kind of thing. That's also been a huge help.
Yeah. And you haven't ever really had to face that before. So
No.
your whole life growing up, you fit in. And
Yeah,
so
I
all of a
saw the
sudden,
world through one lens,
yeah.
and then coming out, I had to re see the world again, kind of.
Yeah. Well, I love too where you were saying like the celebration, because I think it's interesting how some people approach this, and it's kind of like, oh, I'm so sorry, oh, how are you dealing? And it's
Right.
like, that to me is a very interesting question, because I'm like,
Yeah.
what
It's
do you
kind of,
mean?
it's kind
Because
of like a microaggression. Like,
yeah,
they're basically saying you should be mourning.
yeah,
And it's like, there's my kid's still here. They're still
like
living. They're still happy.
they're
The happiest they've ever been.
happier. They're
Yeah.
happier. They're more authentically them. And yeah, like you're still the same Matt that I've known my whole life. Like
Right.
you're still Matt. So nothing has changed with that respect. So I always think that that's kind of interesting, but I do think that it represents the misconceptions and the fear around what it is. And I think a lot of parents worry not just of their kid, but of how people are going to perceive them as a parent. And
Right.
I get that in a way, but I also want to say, in the scheme of things, who's more important to support?
Right.
Your child and their happiness and making sure that they're okay, or worrying about what other people think.
Right. And honestly, who's gonna look like a better parent? Someone that like boots their kid out at 15 on the streets, and makes them more likely to, at risk for mental health issues and drug addictions and all kinds of shit, or the parent that loves and accepts and loves their kid.
Yeah. And I think it's a hard thing, because there's still a lot of misconceptions and confusion on what it means to be transgender.
Right.
And I think, like, let me just put one very blatantly. Why can't you just dress like a man and pretend to be a man?
I don't want to, because I'm not a man. I'm not really a man.
Right. So it's kind of like, so it's like you're saying move from one box to another box, or pretend to be, I mean, even the idea of pretending to be something that you're, that's not fair. Like asking spend your whole life pretending to be something.
Right. And then it's like, why,
for what reason?
Why couldn't you just be a masculine woman? Well, it's like, I want to be a feminine man, I want to be a feminine guy. I don't want to be a masculine woman. I don't want to be perceived that way. So
I once you bring that up too, explain a little bit of how the world is different. Not many of us have been able to experience the world from both a female and a more male perspective. How does the world shift around you from those two different energies?
I definitely notice a lot more on how men and women get treated differently. I get treated so much more differently now than I was before, and like in good and bad ways. Like now, my voice is more, I feel more heard when I'm speaking out about things. I I feel more respected by just other guys that come in, and the way that they at work. I work in retail, so the way that customers approach me and talk to me and interact with me, the way that I and there's also the negatives. Like if I'm in a parking lot and there's a woman that's kind of walking on the other side, I can feel the nervous. I don't know. I feel I don't want to come off as weird or predatory, and I can sense that okay, I'm walking way too close. Maybe I should move, or just stuff like that. So I mean, it goes both ways, and yeah.
Well, I will say, as witnessing the way that you carry yourself, the way that you present yourself and speak is so much more confident and comfortable now than I've ever remember you growing up. Like you just feel you now. And like I said, it was one of those things where I always saw you as a girly girl, like not even just a girl, like a girly girl, because you were so able to kind of try to fit and you're probably overcompensating now that I look back. But when I saw you then,
I did a lot of that. I did a lot of that overcompensating, especially like as a teenager, I did a lot of that. And then early on in my transition, I did a lot of that in the other direction when I was still like, I want to be seen as man.
Right. Then you went to the
I took it away.
stereotype.
And then now that I'm more comfortable, I'm kind of like dialing it back.
Now you're just you. And it's not like you this or that. It's just now you're you. And I can definitely, I love seeing that because I love seeing how comfortable you're actually getting in your own skin. And that's amazing. It is really cool to see. And then having your own home direction is super cool. So what advice, Matt, can you give to parents whose kids are telling them, I'm trans? How and they're freaking out. What advice can you give to those parents?
Just let your kid know that you love them regardless. Not that you just accept them. You love them regardless of whoever, whatever they become. Because I think the scariest part is feeling like you disappointed your parents. That honestly, for me, that would be the worst thing. And feeling like being yourself, it would be disappointing your parents. It would crush me. So just tell them you love them. I mean, let's go get a new haircut. Like, let's go shopping. You know, you look so great in that dress. That haircut makes you look so good. Like things like that.
Yeah. I think what's interesting is we put so much weight on male versus female, which one of my whole theories is we've made them set the boxes so small that like nobody fits in them comfortably anymore. So we're all insecure because we're supposed to be this little tiny picture. And I think people are finally saying that makes no sense. I'm me. And so focusing not on what gender or sexuality your child is, but who your child is as a person.
Right.
It's really important. I love that. All right, Matt, I'm going to let you go. This has been, I always love, we'll be talking so much more, but I appreciate you coming on and sharing all this great info.
Thank you for having me again.
Of course. And then, I got to do a link. You got to send me the link so people can link to your TikTok, because I know you're getting more and more. You're becoming an influencer. You're getting more and more followers because you're expressing stuff that people need to hear. And I think that's really important.
Right. Yeah.
All right.
And it's surprising when I go on and I explain my thoughts, and then so many people are like, oh my God, I feel the exact same. And it shocks me every time. I'm like, no way. There's that many people that feel the exact same way that I do.
Yeah. I think that's amazing. And how comforting is that to other people going, who also thought I'm the only one, I'm alone.
Right. Being able to put that language, to that feeling, those feelings.
Yeah. That's really cool. All right. I will let you go.
Love you. I love you.
And that's a wrap. Thanks for joining me today on Parenting Teens with Dr. Cam. Make sure to visit my website, www.askdrcam.com, where you can subscribe to the show in iTunes, Stitcher, or via RSS, so you'll never miss a show again. While you're at it, if you found value in this episode, I'd appreciate a rating on iTunes, and hey, why not share it with a friend too? Be sure to tune in to my next episode. And remember, parenting teens may not be easy, but with my help, it can be a whole lot easier than this.